Welcome, everybody, to Sinclair and Bale's podcast. My name is Sam Bale, founder of Future Capital Partners and Chief Investment Officers. With me, my buddy John.
Hey, Sam. Good to see you, buddy. Hi, everyone. I'm John Sinclair. I specialize in building growth and turnaround strategies, as well as I've delivered some of the most complex transformation programs globally for some of the Fortune 500 companies, as well as growth companies. And by growth, I mean companies that are at a late stage, advanced stages of multiple rounds of fundraising already.
Jenny, I know we've been talking about it a long time that we wanted to do this podcast. So I know you bring great, understanding of innovative technologies like AI, blockchain. I bring great understanding of capital markets, alternative investments, and economy. So, just to give us a background, like what are we going to be talking about? I want our reviewer to know, like, what kind of values they can get from here.
All right. So that's fantastic. So Sam and I have been speaking about this for several months now. And we're looking at some of these the innovative technologies that are coming out, right? We got 5G, autonomous vehicle, blockchain, and these are transformative technologies. This is going to have a significant impact in financial services or any industry vertical you could think of, including geopolitics, our social life, our personal life, right? So we looked at it this way. So we kind of talked about it and say, how do we structure something like this? So what made sense is, how about we start with transformation, since this is the overarching umbrella that ties all these transformative technologies together. So we felt, well, let's start with transformation and what transformation is and how this will enable all these emerging technologies. And as far as expectation, in the upcoming podcast, our goal is to make sure that we share with you unbiased view, the good, the bad, and the ugly of every technology, what its promises, what's the value, what's the risk and reward, all that, right? But apart from that, I think you asked the question, what is the value that someone could take out of these podcasts, right?
Yeah, like who are the viewers and what value they will get at the end of the day.
Yeah, so let's talk about the viewer first. I think it could be beneficial to anyone that is interested in learning about transformation, management consulting, or emerging technologies. I think they could be valuable. But there's a special value to C-suite executives that are either embarking in an M&A activity or embark on a complex transformation program, right? I think this would add a significant value, but also I think it's going to add a lot of value for a lot of my former consulting colleagues, right? In management consulting, I think some of the things we'll talk about, some of the tools and techniques, I think this will be of immense value to a lot of the industry pros, right? But also it's going to have a significant value, a lot of the CXOs from startup companies, including fund managers as well as private equities, right? Because if you think about it, Sam, the way I see you, like you go ahead and you analyze, assess so many companies looking at their potential, not just from the financial aspect, but you're also looking at the value proposition, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not this is the sound investment, right? So I think for fund managers and private equity, this is going to be also a tremendous value.
No, absolutely. And before we deep dive into it, why don't you kind of define in the lamest term, what is transformation, right? Because a lot of viewers want to know, it's kind of like a vague term. So define what is transformation.
Sure. So in the simplest term, I would say transformation is any drastic change or improvement of an organization. It could be its people, its tools, the ways of working, its processes, right? The why is it relevant? Almost every transformation program is tied into a couple of things. It could be either driven by changes to the market, or it could be purely driven by the CEO initiative, right? It's part of the growth strategy. And a transformation is basically, it's a program, right? It's a sequence of activities, sequence of projects, engagements, or programs that will bring that strategy into fruition, right? So I guess this is the layman's term explanation of transformation.
No, thank you. So I don't want to narrow this conversation like into just one box. I know it has a broader applications. It applies to broader audience, as you said. But looking at it from private equity or alternative funds perspective, we have seen a lot of these initiatives fail, right? So, what are the components of failure and why do they fail, right? And yeah, why don't you tell us that and give us a real life example, like based on your experience, what do you have experience?
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
this is a very good question. The components of failure, right? So there could be many reasons why transformation fails, right? And we could be talking about this for hours, maybe several episodes. But I think to kind of narrow it down, I could probably say we could probably cover between 4 or 5 examples, which we think the primary culprit that causes these issues, right? I would say the first one. I mean, I look at transformation because it is an enabler of the CEO's mission, vision, and strategy. So I think you have to look at it top down, right? So I think one of the most important pieces the clarity in as how the strategy is being communicated. And I'll give you a quick example. I've been through so many of those sessions, and you walk out of the room and you speak to 5 of your colleagues or vendors, and it becomes very quickly, clear that everybody walked away with something different or somewhat different understanding of what is the goal of the strategy is, right? And that's a problem, right? Because oftentimes these strategies are maybe 4 or 5 bullet points, very high level, right? And if it is too high level, in a greenfield, it's not a problem. But when you're looking at a brownfield approach, right, you're looking at dependency. You still have to run your business. You can't do any harm to your running business, right? You still dependent upon existing legacy processes, systems, tools, and the people, right? So you have to look at it, 2 things. There has to be clear alignment. One is with the existing, and the second is what you're trying to do, achieve, right? What is the end state objective? There has to be a direct correlation and complete alignment, right? So if the CEO's strategy is not crystal clear, or at least clear to the point the next level leadership takes that and builds the strategy and not strategy, I mean the transformation program, you have a problem, right? So that would be number one. The second would be conflicting priorities among the C-suite, right? So CEO's direct reports, right?
So, yeah, what does it really mean, conflicting priorities? Give us an example as well,
Sure.
if you can.
Yeah. So look, I think it's by design. I don't think it's anything. I don't believe that anybody is working against the CEO. In at least most cases, I haven't seen that. So you have to look at it this way. It's when a transformation program is being launched, right? One thing I've observed in my over 2 decades of experience, that oftentimes this is being developed by the CEO and a handful of trusted advisor and with some strategy consulting, Bain, McKinsey, or whoever, right? Oliver Wyman. And it gets communicated once it's developed. So the challenge here is this: you have to, you're looking at some of the enabling organizations that are highly dependent, right? The transformation program is depending on these organizations, like for example, HR, procurement, legal, marketing, right? Now, in a brownfield, it's not like all these organizations are, staffed adequately to support a new transformation program, right? They're probably fighting fire on a daily basis, right? So they have to do their daily job. So what happens is a transformation program is launched, and all these stakeholders are being communicated at the launch. Now they'll have to catch up, and they'll have to figure out what does that mean for them, how it will impact their current workload, how will they support it, what staffing they'll have to go and get to support this organization. And that could take several months. I've seen something goes as long as a year, because the fact by the time all these dependent organizations were engaged, and they're basically starting from the scratch, right? So it's almost a lot of learning involved. So I think the importance here is this: if all these dependent groups are not part of the planning stage and not jointly developing the strategy, and they have joint accountability to the outcome, you will have conflicting priorities, because they're going to prioritize what's their daily work is, right? HR has to run the rest of the organization, right? They're not going to drop the whole company to support a program as important as it may be. It's a balancing act, right? There's so much they can do. Same thing with procurement, right? They still have to negotiate with vendors. They'll still have to pay the bills. They'll still have to onboard vendors. They'll have to review all the T&Cs with legal, right? So those work doesn't go away, right? So now all this additional work that is going to come as part of transformation, this has to be taken into consideration, right? And that's what I mean, because they all have their priorities, right? Don't assume that just because you're launching a transformation program, everybody has the same exact priority, right? Unless the alignment happens at the early on.
The one of the concern I see from the from the other side is that if you involve a lot of people into a strategic planning phase, right, there are a lot of opinions, and sometimes it doesn't get anywhere, right, and can take months and months to just even come up with the initiative, right. So it could be time consuming. So what do you say to that? Like, people I have seen, they don't want to involve other stakeholders because they think it could be a lot of opinions and they won't get anywhere.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I think when I say involve everyone early on, I don't mean that everyone has the same role. CEO owns the strategy. And so if you're building a transformation program, I'm assuming you have already identified a leader. This leader is well empowered, and this leader is going to be the one who's going to have to define what are the dependencies and clearly articulate what is the end state objective. And all these stakeholders in the room, their job is not there to give an opinion of what the end state objective is going to be or how. Their job is not to provide the how. I think that has to be clearly communicated, right? It has to be a structured approach. These are very senior executive management consulting driven exercise, right? These are highly structured. So everybody has a role, but it's not going to become an opinion session because the strategy is already owned by the CEO. And end state objective as part of the transformation is owned by the leader, whoever has been assigned already for this. What they're looking for is, these are my dependency within the organization. What will it take for each one of you in this room to support me? And here is my timeline. So the transformation program office or the leader will communicate the end state objective, the timeline, and all these stakeholders have to basically look at that, and they'll have to start developing their supporting plan, what they'll have to do to support each one of these work streams to take a transformation program to fruition. That means the work starts that day. Mm. And it's not an afterthought, right? So now the transformation office can take into all the feedback, not opinion, but feedback. Like, what will it take for procurement to be fully ready to support this from day one? What will it take for HR to have all the processes in place, meaning whether it's the rate card, comp plan, the specific specialty skill set type of skill matrix, recruiting plan and all that, right? So what will it take them, right? Mm-hmm. So they also have to come up with their plan, right? You have to incorporate all these dependents into the master plan, right? So I think that's kind of important to make sure that, it's a very structured approach. This is not something that goes on for weeks and months. This happens pretty fast, as complex as it sounds. But if it is done right by really seasoned people who has done this thing, this is a pretty standard exercise. But the sad part is, oftentimes, this piece is almost an afterthought. Mm-hmm. Usually, these dependent organizations are informed after the transformation program is already developed and being launched, and then they're being included, right? So I think that is definitely a problem. Mm-hmm. And the next piece is, of course, is the leadership, mm-hmm. right? So I think I probably should have spoke about the leadership first, but anyway, so the leadership is very important, right? You want to make sure you have the right leader, right? So when a CEO comes into an organization, they are inheriting, because again, I'm sticking to the realm of brownfield, right? The greenfield is not a non-issue, but in a brownfield is where the problem is, right? Because you're coming into an organization, you are inheriting a lot of leaders, a lot of smart people, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean everyone has the same skill. And you also have to accept the reality is that title does not automatically, guarantee the type of specialty skill set that you need to drive a transformation, right? And transformation program is complex. It requires someone, not just having the skill of doing and delivering those complex programs, but someone is not just bound by a title, but someone who's truly a visionary, a leader, right? Someone who's a high integrity player, right? Someone who has self-awareness, and someone who demonstrates empathy for the people who works for them, as well as the vendors, and as well as the senior executive leadership, right? So if you don't have those three key attributes, you're going to have problem, right? And I can give you some examples.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Why don't you give us two examples? One, empathetic leadership, and the other one is non-empathetic leadership,
Okay.
right? So,
Okay. Yeah. So I was working for a management consulting firm, and I was building a divestiture strategy for a wound healing manufacturing company. So this is a very advanced skill set. People that have suffered third-degree burn. So you're looking at from the specialty sheets to the bed to the chair, because you can't, these people have no skin in their body, so they have to be sitting or lying in a special material so that doesn't make their situation worse, right? So even the technology that's built around this type of the healthcare, it's a specialty skill set, right? So you may be building a back-end application to support the treatment program, but you still have to have, the industry knowledge to do something like this. It's very complex. So the CIO was a brilliant guy, no nonsense, and he's one of those guys. He's not into buzzwords. Like, anytime you have an idea, he'll just tell you, get up to the whiteboard and start drawing. Mm-hmm. Tell me what your idea is. And in real time, he wants to develop something, critique something, and come to a solution, right? So it took a little while, and I started. It was supposed to be a 4 weeks engagement. So I started building good rapport with him. And one day he comes to me and he said, "Hey, John, I feel like when we're working in this room, things are just working. It makes sense. But there's something missing. There's a gap. I see when we're executing, something just not meshing. There's something missing. I don't know what it is." Mm-hmm. So, do you see that? I said, "Yes, I do." And he goes, "Look, that's causing delay and vibration within the company. What do you think it is?" I said, "Well, look, I'm giving a consultant's answer, right? So I'm saying, well, it all depends." He goes, "John, stop. I've known you for a little while. I think I know you pretty good, and I think you have a good understanding of who I am. Please talk to me openly and honestly. I'm looking for a partner. And let me be more clear. If I'm the problem, I'd like you to tell me honestly, am I the problem?" So that's a very difficult position to be in as a consultant, right? Because you're a management consultant, because this is your, key stakeholder. This is their key customer. This is the person who signs your statement of work, right? How do you say anything that could potentially be, misconstrued as, you being disrespectful or being overly critical? It's a balancing act, right? So I said to him, I said, "Dave, are you sure you want me to say this? More than likely, you're going to kick me out after this, right?" Mm-hmm. He says, "John, I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't mean it. I really want to know, am I the problem?" So, which I think almost most consultants would avoid giving that answer. They'll give some diplomatic answers. I said, "Dave, to be honest, I think you may inadvertently playing a role in it, and I'll tell you why." I said, "Look, you've got some really solid leaders," and he really did. I mean, his CTO and all his leadership, they were like really brilliant, good people, and it's one of those rare things. And it was in San Antonio, Texas. People have been working together for 15, 20 years, which is growing up in New York. That's unheard of in Wall Street, right? Mm-hmm. So it was almost like a family situation. So I said to him, I said, "Look, you have relationship with all these people." He's one of those guys. He would, after the meeting, leadership meeting, he'll just walk the floor and he'll just pick the brain off any engineers, right? Mm. He'll just ask a question to kind of, I guess, maybe validate, maybe getting a better estimate on timeline or something, whatever the objective may be. The challenge with that is when a leadership giving an estimate of a part of a transformation program, you take into a lot of things into consideration. You're looking at the the relative newness of the technology, the potential risk, this testing time, the integration time, going into production, and then some sort of an executive overhead baked in just in case something goes wrong, right? So you have to look at this because you have a running business. You can't, disrupt that. So when he's going in front of an engineer's desk, the engineer is reading it without any context. Boss wants to know how long this task takes to complete. So he's giving an answer based on his best estimate. He says, I can do this in 2 days. So now he comes back, the CIO comes back and he goes, hey, you guys are giving me an estimate of 3 to 5 weeks, and my engineer is telling me that I can do this in 2 days. Why there is such a discrepancy? So it creates a lot of vibration. Now, it's also taking up time. Now you have to explain the whole process, why we're looking at things holistically to the entire enterprise versus an engineer giving an estimate to his senior executive what the task takes. That's a 2 different conversation. And as I was speaking, it became very clear. And he looks at me, he goes, you know what? I get it. I totally get it. And he said, I shouldn't have done that. I trust my leaders. They have always delivered for me. I shouldn't have gone and second-guessed them. And that was not my intent. But I could see how this could easily be misconstrued as I was undermining my leaders. And it could definitely cause some vibration. And you know what? You're going to see a different me, right? So, so long story short, this was like a perfect example of a leader who was acutely aware, very self-aware of who he is as a leader, his surrounding, things he says, right, how he reacts, but even more so that his empathy for his leaders, for his people, the people that work under him directly or people that work under his leaders, right, including the vendors, and even the way he approached me, right. His approach was so authentic. I could assure you, I have never seen. First of all, I've never seen a leader actually comes up and ask a question like that. And even if there was a question, I've seen most consultants would avoid answering that question because that's like it's a no-win situation. Oftentimes, they ask you a question. When you give them the right answer, they look at it like saying, that's not the answer I was looking for, right? So so this was a good example of a solid leader.
So that's what I was going to ask you. That's the best case scenario. And have you worked with a leader or example, if you can give us, where they weren't open to criticism? They weren't, they just wanted to assess everybody else, but not themselves. So
yeah. So so I do remember somebody. And so this corporation was going through significant divestitures, huge, corporation doing a lot of business with defense. So when I came in, I joined the leadership team, and I remember one of the things, I was told as we were embarking on different transformation programs, and a few names came up, and every time I saw her name was on top, and the feedback I got was, you want something done, she'll get it done for you. So that's brilliant. I mean, how often do you come to a brownfield, situation where an existing company, you already have a talent, a leader that everyone already can vouch for? So I was really impressed by that. So, but before I took the time to meet with this person, I spent some time with my chief of staff. My goal was for him to give me the lay of the land and explain to me who's who of the organization, right? And he gave me a very different view. So he gave me, example of some of these successful projects. And then he says, look, if you're looking at from the corporate standpoint, all these engagement got done, within time and within budget. Okay. So what's the problem? The problem is it's not what got done, what impact it left in a long term, what gap it created. I was like, tell me more. And he told me that almost every engagement that she took on, she came in with such an iron fist to the point it drove away almost a majority of the existing talent, the senior talent. They simply quit. And she basically relied heavily on consulting firms to get the job done, and the job did get done. The problem was now the corporation was highly reliant on third-party organizations without the institutional knowledge. So those kind of things, you can, those risks are not visible immediately, but it causes immeasurable harm longer term when you're doing transformation program, because that's when it pops up and you realize you're looking at a major, a financial system or an ERP or CRM, and you realize that this monolithic system was designed, customized by so many times that the senior developers had left the company, and no one else even understands how to manage those customization, right? And he gave me several examples of some of these high profile, high visibility engagements. So I realized this is a situation, I'm new to the organization, and this individual comes with a lot of trust of the senior leader. So that gave me a good understanding that this is somebody who manages up really well, but it's very different how she managed down. And so, I think so. I had to have an honest conversation with my direct, leader, and explaining that, look, I gave some of the real world example, and I said, look, this is a, time box. There's no room for learning on the job. There's no room for failure. I looked at these last 4, highly complex engagement that the company has undertaken, although they got done in time, but they really didn't produce the end state objective. It actually created a significant gap in institutional knowledge, right? So I guess this would be a good example of showing. I mean, we can talk about this much deeper length, but this is at a high level. This gives you a good understanding of if you have a leader who lacks compassion and empathy, you could have some serious problem. You're going to have a demoralized workforce, right? So, and if you're thinking transformation and you've got a team of people that are completely demoralized and not feeling safe, the chance of being successful is next to zero.
Oh, thank you.
So, I think I gave you a 3 example, right? The lack of alignment and the clarity in corporate strategy. Talked about conflicting priorities. We talked about leadership. So let me give you 2 more. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the next thing I see, it also plays a key role, and it's the methodology that have been embraced by the Big 4 or Big 5 consulting firms of how they handle the transformation program, right? I think it's pretty dated, and I'll qualify that in a minute. All these programs, the methodology that was developed in the 70s and 80s, or even some part of 90s, it made the assumption that companies have a certain amount of inefficiency or a lot of inefficiency. So I said, so they took that, they basically replicated the private equity model, right? Private equity model, you do this all the time. You're looking at distressed company. What's the first thing you look at? Okay, we're going to make an investment, but the first thing would be to get rid of all the bad costs, right? And the bad costs could be systems, tools, lower performing businesses or underperforming businesses, and of course, additional headcount, right? And then you focus on that high performance business and make the investment and try to flip that and recoup your investment. So when you take that approach, it may be very effective at private equity even today, and it might have been very effective in the 70s, 80s, and 90s corporate America or the Western companies, right? But it's not the same today, because if you think about since Y2K, almost, I would say 80 to 90% of organizations have gone through 4th, 5th, or 6th generation of outsourcing. Every single outsourcing contract, you're already, taking out a significant amount of inefficiencies, right? There is a point of diminishing return. How much can you take out? After 3rd, 4th, and 5th outsourcing, I'm pretty sure there isn't much left, right? And if you go any more, you will actually start impacting institutional knowledge. That there are very few people that are remaining. These people are probably the heart and soul of the company. They knows where everything is buried, right? They know every systems, every tools, all that, right? You touch these people, more than likely now you have no institutional knowledge left, right? So I think that's what I mean, the outdated transformation approach, because what they're coming up with today, it might have been very effective, even I would say perhaps maybe even 7, 8, 9 years ago, but today I just don't see it. And that's one of the reasons why you see, I'll give you a quick example. If you're coming into an organization today and man, I could tell you in the last 5 years, I probably have observed at least 3 programs like this. And the first approach was headcount reduction. Why? It frees up cost. It's going to start self-funding the program. So that's a problem. Because now all of a sudden you just took away your strategic focus from the end state objective. Your return on investment should be focused around the end state objective, the CEO's mission, vision, and strategy, right? It could be growth, it could be employee experience, customer experience, or new market, whatever it may be. That's where your razor focus should be. When you start focusing here, the first thing, well, look what you just did. You just destabilized the organization. The moment you announce a headcount reduction at an inception of a transformation program, you sent a shockwave, a fear, a sense of uncertainty. So now the people that you're left with are the people more than likely are not the specialist type, right? Because you're going to let go a whole bunch of people. Smart people will immediately start looking for a job. They'll find work. They'll have no problem finding work. So now what just happened? The remaining people that you have do not have the institutional knowledge. They're probably relying heavily on the vendor. It's almost like blind leading the blind. The vendors are coming in. They may have consulting expertise, but they don't know your company. They don't know the inner workings, right? It's a learning curve. Who are they going to rely on? Your senior talent. They have left the company. That doesn't work. And does it make sense? So that's what I mean by the whole process of focusing immediately on headcount reduction. I think it's a pretty outdated concept. I just don't think it simply works. I have not seen I would say probably in a decade that this has actually ever produced the outcome the company is looking for. And in the longer term, it's end up costing you a lot more to get the program done. Maybe at that quarter it may look attractive, but then you look at your overall entire program cost and the risk you introduce, it just doesn't make any sense.
But some people may argue that, you know, the new emerging technology has some applicability to this old approach. Automation will cost a lot of people their jobs, right? So what is your counter argument to that? So if the automation, a lot of companies started to adapt automation, so the one of the implication is people will lose their job.
Yeah. So I think so don't confuse selling with delivering, right? So there is a lot of things that comes out of marketing, companies, product marketing and consulting firms when they're promoting a new technology, right? I remember Gartner, oh my God, this would be at least, I would say it was 2007. And I remember Gartner's symposium and the prediction was, please don't quote me, but I think I'm trying to paraphrase it. They were heavily pushing desktop virtualization. They wanted there should be no more physical, desktops because this is secure. You could access your work from anywhere, any place, anytime. That was the appeal, right? And they projected. So this was 2007. So I would say, I believe 2010 or 2015, something like that. They said 90% of world's the desktop laptop will be replaced by virtual desktop. It'll be all VDI. There'll be no physical, you may have, like a tablet or something in your house, or you could work from a airport kiosk or whatever. Like you would not have the need to carry a desktop or a laptop. So, and I remember this was selling like a hotcake. I mean, I remember many of the sales guys in my team, they were making 7-figure commissions, right? This was the hottest ticket in town. And but fast forward 2022, I mean, you have a laptop, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not virtualized image. I'm sure it's you're accessing local, right? And I could tell you right now that a lot of friends and colleagues that I know that are still using laptop every single day to do their work, right? And it's not fully virtualized, right? They're still accessing application, maybe in the back end, maybe in cloud, but you still have the need for a physical a laptop, right? So I think, these type of promise that the automation will eliminate jobs. Yeah, first of all, it has to be done right? So if you look at a workflow, right? If you look at a procure to pay, the entire life cycle of this workflow, every single touch point, right? That means every single one of these dependencies have to be fully automated, right? You cannot automate a part of it and not the other because your environment is constantly changing, your code is constantly changing, right? So it doesn't work. Yes, it will eventually do that, but what I'm trying to say is this: let's not cut our legs, before actually delivering the intended or end state promise, right? The promise is your company will be able to eliminate X percentage of employee once you embrace complete end-to-end automation. The operating word is complete end-to-end automation, right? It cannot be partial. So yes, but once it's done, I think it makes sense. Let the natural evolution of automation drive, the headcount reduction. But by then, these people will be able to focus on other activities, right, as opposed to just operational and repeat work or whatever, right? But what I'm saying is, don't make a decision based on a marketing promise. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, that's why I gave you an example of virtual desktop versus, and advanced automation, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies have already, embraced, automation. But does that means that they have achieved that, a percentage of headcount reduction? I don't think so. Yeah, the promise is there, right? Because now, as it's getting more advanced, you're embedding artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithm. As more and more the decisions are being automated, and it only happens over time because artificial intelligence only get better, right? And I'm sure it's going to happen eventually. But a lot of big corporations still have a lot of these manual checkpoints for governance purpose, right? But because of these manual intervention, it actually stops the automation to drive the ultimate benefit. Because in essence, what are you doing really? You're also letting go. You're basically here's the thing. So let's just say you are a business user, and you want to just spin up, I don't know, a 500 instance of web servers in AWS. Depending on your Active Directory and your corporate title, and you actually have, call it a virtual credit limit in that company based on your role, your title, all that, it's already been predefined. You'll be able to spin up a certain amount of machine on your own, and once you reach that threshold, it'll automatically trigger a next level approval, right? Now, assuming the next level approval is fully automatic, it goes to your manager, and all he or she has to do is a yes or a no, and it's done. Things moves along to the next step. Now, your manager may want to review the whole thing, and he doesn't want this to be automated. He wants it to be fully reviewed. He wants to know each one of these machines, which business is going to serve, what is the TCO, what's the ROI, has it gone through some sort of a business review and all that stuff. Now, this brilliant promise of automation just died, right? So what I'm trying to say is this. I think I'm kind of taking it to a little broader topic. I think the one thing you have to pay attention is this. I think the way we came to this topic was don't do headcount reduction first. And I think I'm basically trying to reinforce that same statement, that don't make your decision based on a promise by a product vendor, right? You have to kind of look at it in the industry. Who else has done that, right? And if you must, look, ultimately, why do we do transformation? Because it's going to provide some level of efficiency. It's going to improve our cost, make us more competitive, right? But achieve that first, and then make the decision of headcount reduction. What I'm trying to say is the risk outweigh any benefit. Because the moment you do a headcount reduction at early stages of a transformation, you're going to have a demoralized workforce who no longer trust the leadership. You're not gaining that 100%. I could assure you that. This is just human. As cool as it sounds in consulting world, in a beautiful PowerPoint or in a marketing messaging, the truth of the matter is these are human. They have bills, they have family, they have mortgage. And if they see their colleagues are just getting, walked out by HR, trust me, This will impact their psyche. This will impact their performance. This will diminish their trust into the company they're serving.
So that's outdated transformation approach. So give us your last point. What is it?
End state objective, right? So, end state objective, it has to be, you can't just talk about how this is going to benefit the company. Because CEO has done a great job. CEO has his, the board and the broader market, all the analysts. He has to impress and show them what it will do for their investments, what it will do for the market, overall company, right? But when you're communicating internally, it's extremely important you communicate the value to every stakeholder within the organization. So think about all the dependent organization, HR, procurement, legal, marketing. They all have to know what's in it for them. How will it benefit them? How it will transform their experience? Then you have to look at your employee, your most valuable asset. And I cannot impress upon you the importance of focusing there, because these are the people who's going to work side by side with your consulting firm. They're the one who's going to guide them to make sure there's no risk gets introduced to the existing environment, to the existing business. And if they don't feel valued, if they're being treated as just a spectator, sideline watching from outside, someone else is delivering this awesome work, and they miss the opportunity of learning by doing, I think that's a big risk a company could introduce, right? Because you just lost your most valuable asset. These are the people who's going to, once this transformed state is realized, who's going to serve your customer? It's these people, your employees, right? And if they are not valued, if they're not part of it, if they're not learning by doing, what's their incentive, right? So, and that's what I mean. The end state objective has to be clearly articulated with all the value to everyone that's involved. That includes all your employees.
So it is end state objective with coupled with incentive.
Absolutely.
For people,
absolutely.
Right? So thank you. I think you laid out the problem really well, right? But most of us are interested how that to make it work, right? So based on your experience, I know you've been part of a lot of successful initiatives because we worked together on some of them. Give us a best approach. Like, what is the best approach to execute these initiatives?
Very good. So you want to tie this in?
I want to tie this in, and I want to pick your brain, like the wealth of knowledge you bring. And I know this is a lot of valuable information we're going to be sharing. So, but I want a reviewer and listener to walk away with some tangible information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is the blueprint, right? Look, we could probably articulate 20, 30 different things that people could focus on. So I think we're going to stick to 6 for now. I think if you follow this 6, I think you pretty much will cover 90% of your organizational risk or business risk that you could potentially avoid, right? The first and foremost. So again, I'm going to come back to the same conversation. If it is a greenfield, it doesn't matter. Right? You're bringing in a brand new CEO because all your team is also new. So you pretty much had an opportunity to vet everyone at the same time. So you pretty much have a good understanding. But when you're looking at a brownfield, the CEO is inheriting a lot of talented people. But talent automatically does not translate into the required skill set for your leader who will lead a transformation program, right? So I think the first and foremost, I think what will provide a significant return on investment is to conducting a third-party, limited scope leadership assessment. If you have identified and shortlisted, let's just say 5 or 6 leaders, and you want this specialty consulting firm comes in and assess these leaders on 4 things. First and foremost is the skill set. Do they have the track record of delivering complex program, right? And their success rate and all that stuff. And the second, the 3 things that I constantly talk about is this person is a high integrity person? Is he authentic, right? The second is this person, does he have empathy for his people, his colleagues, his coworkers, people that work for him, the vendors, right? And is that person self-aware? If those 3 key attributes is absent, that is not the leader you want. And the reason why this is going to be a problem, because a transformation program any transformation translates into change. Every change is disruptive. And disruptive in a running organization, it's not a good thing, trust me. It adds a tremendous amount of stress to people that are trying to do this on a day in, day out, because you still have to maintain a running business, right? You don't want to do any harm to your existing revenue base, right? And you're trying to build something new. So you want to make sure that you've got the right people and they're completely vetted by independent consulting company. Again, it's a limited scope. It's probably the best investment a company could make. And I could tell you the value, the return on investment right here. What does it take? Maybe a 2 to 3 weeks assessment, something like this. And a transformation program may be anywhere from 10 million, 20 million, 100 million. Could be $1 billion program, depending on which industry you're in, right? Do you want to find out why it failed after the money is already spent? Or would you rather have this, this limited scope leadership assessment to vet the right leader, empower that person, give him or her the right decision rights to go launch this program and bring it to fruition, right? So I think that's number one. I think having vetting a leadership, your leadership team, and pick the right person that is completely unbiased, right? Not influenced by anybody's opinion, but somebody completely, and make sure this consulting firm is not the firm that's delivering a transformation. You don't want conflict of interest, right? So this is very important. First and foremost, get the leadership right, right? The second would be the effective articulation of the value and the end state objective. I think I kind of touched upon that in the previous segment, right? That, message matter, messenger matter, right? I think messenger matters more than the message. If you don't have the right messenger with appropriate empathy and self-awareness, you could pretty much lose your entire audience from the day you announce the transformation program. Now, if you have an effective and compassionate leader, be it a third-party consulting firm, be it your internal marketing company that's supporting you, and communicating the value proposition of this program effectively, I think that goes a long way. Because the last thing you want to do, somebody that lacks empathy comes in and talks about transformation and change and makes statements like, I've seen that, trust me. I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was in a factory, and they were manufacturing composite. No, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. I was in a factory. They were manufacturing train. And so all the workers are union workers. And some of these people, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the union workers that does this type of work. This is like a second generation, like meaning their father worked in that factory. Some cases, some of their grandfather worked there. So they're like a family environment. So here I am there with some of my colleagues, and these are all corporate executives, right? And as we're discussing, all of a sudden my colleague starts saying something like, "Oh, I can't wait until I introduce the robotic, but this is not the process automation. I'm talking about actual robotics and industrial manufacturing." He says this is going to, introduce so much efficiency, and we'll be able to get all these done with maybe a 1/3 of the people. So that's what I mean by lack of self-awareness. You've got a room full of people that came to see us and show us and gave us the tour of the factory. All they heard that this guy is here to kill my job. And that's what I mean. Message matter, messenger matter. If your leaders are not compassionate, lack self-awareness, you could, even the most ambitious and in the most noble transformation program could die from the start, right? And I think, so the number 3.
Yeah.
Did that cover that aspect of that?
It did, yeah.
Okay. People. So this is probably our most valuable asset for any company, right? Unless you're just selling widget, then it doesn't matter, right? But if you are delivering value, if you're delivering a service, your people is what matters, right? Anytime you're doing transformation, I know I mentioned this, I think, a couple of times already in this segment, that if you're not making them feel part of it, part of that journey, if they don't feel like they are, their their personal and professional skill is developing, right, as part of this journey, it's going to be very hard to have a motivating or highly motivated team behind you. They have to know there is something in it for them as well. They have to know that you are looking out for them. So if the people first, and not just in speech and fancy PowerPoint, but in action. So
that's what I want to ask you. What does it really mean, people first? Because I think somewhere I read the data shows about 80 or 90%. Don't quote me on that exactly. People hate their job, right? So if it's people first, the hating job number should not be that high. So what does that really mean, people's first?
Yeah. So when I worked in at EMC Corporation, by the way, the chairman and CEO, Joe Tucci, probably one of the shining example of what a leader should be. So one of the company we acquired was Pivotal, and they do the Cloud Foundry. So I remember I went to the Pivotal office, and I was blown away to see how happy people were. And when I say they're happy, I mean the entire work environment was designed in a way that was like a low stress. And when I say low stress, I mean genuinely low stress. So they were having full agile software engineering practice, right? But the way the place was set up, it was like a judgment-free work zone. Meaning if somebody felt stressed, there was everything on the floor. There was a ping pong table to pool table to the resting area. I mean, I can't tell you what was in there. I mean, they had chef-prepared meal. They had any drink your heart desires. Everything was available. The company was going above and beyond to take care of their employee. And it was crystal clear. They kind of knew that they were taken care of. And one thing, it was clear to me that nobody wanted to go out for lunch because they were having so much fun working there. So they would either work in some part of the on the floor while they're having lunch, but they're also at the same time talking, collaborating with colleagues. So to me, that's what I mean, that by show it. These people, they felt it. They knew they were valued. They knew they were empowered. They knew that they had the autonomy to make decision and not be punished for making a decision, right? They hired best of the best talent. They gave them the right empowerment. They gave them the autonomy, and they took care of these people, right? Also, anytime there was the major program running, they made sure the goals and objectives were aligned with their compensation. So everybody, look, compensation drives behavior. I don't care what anybody says. That's the bottom line. If that was not the case, you would never find a good CEO anymore, right? Because that's the reason why companies go out of their way, hires the best of the best CEOs, right? And pays them some of the most attractive compensation package. The same is true for whether you're hiring your maintenance crew or your highly skilled software engineering team, right? So their goals and objective has to be tied to the project, to the end state objective. So that way they understand they're all rewarded. So that way everybody's aligned to the outcome of this transformation program, right? And I think that's a good example of showing when you truly care for your people and not just in PowerPoint, but in action, right? And they will know. They will know when they're empowered and they're valued, right? They don't feel like a second-class citizen and they're not a spectator in their own company.
Yeah, I feel like the next point may be tied up to this as well. So what is the next point?
So next point, I think I talked about it several times already, right? Please do not lead with headcount reduction. I know almost every consulting firm will come into you and say, hey, we're going to self-fund this entire program. We're going to cut costs and we're going to find money. Now, I don't believe that's a transformation program. If you could self-fund the transformation program, this is probably some level of operational optimization project. So let's not confuse an evolutionary engagements within a company that happens. You're modernizing an existing application or modernizing an existing product or whatever, right? That's not necessarily transformation, right? So let's not confuse that. So I think it's extremely important that, again, just don't lead with headcount reduction first. As attractive it may make it look like in a shorter term, the price is going to be too heavy to pay in the longer term.
Got it. And what is the stakeholder alignment?
Okay. So the stakeholder alignment, I think this is the first topic we talked about, right? That many transformation program fails because you are engaging the people you're dependent upon or the group you're dependent upon, like procurement and HR and legal, after the program already launched. You're already too late. So you have to get them, engaged early on during the planning phase of it. So they're part of this, right? They're fully aware of what you need. They're fully aware of the timeline. They're fully aware of the deliverable. And make sure these people that's going to be supporting you, their goals and objective is also aligned, including the vendors. And I'll explain to you why this is important. So let's just say you have aligned your HR dedicated team that's going to support your program. You've got somebody from procurement. You've got marketing folks. Legal. Fantastic. No problem. But you don't have all these skills in-house, so you have to go and hire some specialty consulting firms or whatever, right? What happens, your procurement, they have a different KPI. And their KPI is not based on your success of your program, but their KPI is based on how much money they saved to the company, right? And I'll qualify that. Let me give you an example of that. So we were doing a commercial aircraft engagement. It was purely driven by data and analytics, right? And we were looking for finding ways to optimize fuel consumption in commercial aircraft. So we knew this company, and I'm talking about this is probably almost 8 or 9 years ago, right? So data analytics was still, people were talking about it, but it was still at its infancy. It didn't have the maturity. There was probably at that time maybe one of the company that was actually doing real world work for a lot of government projects and stuff. They've done a serious analytics type of work and actually provided some serious value. And there was a lot of other vendors, a lot of startups. They were getting into it, right? But we needed to produce outcome. So we invited quite a few vendors. Almost maybe all of them got knocked out after the first round. They simply could not even come up with what we were looking for. And this specific vendor was just like completely aligned and probably even going higher than what we needed them to do. So anyway, so when the time came to program starts, these people made good faith investments. They work with us. They understand our objective and everything. Procurement went ahead and basically found a whole bunch of talent and gave us the resources we needed. We needed data engineers, data scientists, and a lot of back-end engineers, right? And some front ends. So we're like, what's going on? They're like, well, listen, we got very good rate. We negotiated very good rate card, and we have an SLA. That means if something doesn't work out, you can get a resource within 2 weeks. No problem. I'm like, that's fantastic. But now, all these people that you have brought in on a rate card basis, they have no skin in the game. They use up those bulk of hours, they're done. Their work is done. Whether your engagement has reached its end state objective or not. So what just happened here? You've gone through all this planning. You've aligned all your leaders. You've aligned all your dependencies, meaning all your other stakeholders internally. Somewhere there's a failure. One of your key organization, procurement, because they have a different KPI of what they see success, they went ahead and they hired the company they felt that gave them the best cost possible. The company was saving money. That cost saving was minute to the risk it introduced to this transformation program, which has direct impact on the revenue, the top line, and the bottom line. So look what just happened. The program is pretty much at this point screwed, right? It's not going anywhere. And by the time you make course correction, you lost that vendor. More than likely, they probably put the team in some other engagement, some other customer, right? So that even just the time lost, the amount of time you lost, the saving that the procurement might have introduced, it's not worth the risk. So what I mean by that is make sure that that you have your stakeholders, and that means it also includes external vendors. Make sure everyone is aligned to your end state objective, or else it doesn't work.
So give us the last point, culture of hyper accountability. It's kind of one of my favorites. So,
Yeah, this is the last one, right? So the culture of hyper accountability is basically kind of touched upon the last one, right? What I talked about, making sure it's alignment. So you want to make sure you're have an organization, not only everybody's KPI is aligned, but you also want to make sure that people don't introduce or make arbitrary decisions or unilateral decision without having any accountability. So one of the example I would give you is, let's just say you're accountable for the outcome of this engagement and you need some specialty engineering asset, right? You need somebody who knows a master in data science and analytics, and your HR goes out there and finds you some data engineer for $75 an hour. Great, but you have no time to learn on the job. What just happened here? So they made a decision without having any accountability, and you have to own the accountability and the outcome. So by introducing, that's what I mean, every decision process in your entire stakeholders, the guiding principle must be, don't make any decision that does not meet the end state objective. Meaning every decision you're going to make on our behalf, you have to be accountable for that. So in absence of that accountability, people will simply go ahead and make decisions because in their mind, they did the right thing, right?
Yep.
And that's what I mean, the culture of hyper accountability. Because otherwise, what happens is you're going to get free opinion. Everybody has one. People will introduce different options, which may not serve your end state objective, and you're the only one who's accountable for the outcome. So just make sure that accountability is across the entire team.
Thank you, John. This is a great wealth of knowledge you shared with us. So I want to say thank you to our viewers and listeners. We're going to be bringing, podcasts like in emerging technologies, 5G, I think, or smart cities, our next one. And also we're going to be bringing how to invest in these technologies. So this is our great first podcast. So I want to say thank you to our listeners and viewers again. Any closing thoughts?
So, guys, I'm super excited to actually doing this, and Sam and I have been talking about this for quite some time, and I'm glad we did this, and I'm actually excited about all the promises, all these emerging technology that that offers, and I think I could assure you that every single podcast that we will do is going to bring in wealth of knowledge, and it's going to give you the level of empowerment you need before you embark on your transformation journey. And I hope this conversation was helpful. At a minimum, I think the final piece that we talked about, our final thought, I think that's going to serve as a checklist. And this comes with 23 years of success and setbacks. And hopefully this is adds value to your organization. And we would look forward to talking to you guys in our next episode. Again, I'm super excited about the topics. And thank you all for listening and watching.
Thank you. And by the way, we will make this information available in a PDF form, so you can download it on the link below. So we'll have our team upload it on a YouTube and other channels. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.